Okay, peeps, welcome back. So we're going to be going over the Grayscale Trust today, and we're also going to talk a little bit about the upcoming PPI and CPI. So with that being said, let's get it. Okay, so let's talk PPI and CPI first, and then we'll get into the trusts. So today is Monday. PPI comes out tomorrow, and the CPI comes out on Wednesday. So I want to show you guys this. The reason why these things matter is because it's, again, PPI and CPI are a measure of basically manufacturing and also inflation, whether inflation's going to be higher, lower, stuff like that, so that the Fed can gauge as to whether it's time for them to cut rates or not, or how they're going to go about doing whatever they do with rates. So, yeah, basically more or less PPI is going to be 5:30 tomorrow morning, and CPI is going to be 5:30 Wednesday morning. As you guys can see there, it does look like there's going to be some Fed heads talking this week as well, which pretty much par for the course in the markets. That happens often. So yeah, here's the expectations. Forecast 2.7%, basically prior or current 3%. That would be for the year over year for PPI. And that's hold on a second. So that's core PPI. Sorry. So what we're looking at here is headline PPI. So 2.6% expected to be at 2.3%. So I would say, if it comes in with market expectations, ideally markets are probably going to go up, would be my guess. So on Wednesday, also very similar thing, but this is the CPI, and this is also at the same time of the morning, just on Wednesday instead of Tuesday. So we have core inflation here. We don't really care about month over month. I think the year over year is what's more important. So 3.3% current. The forecast is 3.2%. So in my opinion, if it's 3.2% or lower than that, that's going to be bullish for the markets. That will be very good for stocks and crypto. And then also headline inflation here, 3%, forecast 2.9%. If it's 2.9% or lower than 2.9%, I think that the markets are going to moonshot, in my opinion, because again, you guys have to understand with the trajectory of inflation has not, and I'm actually going to pull up this chart myself to show you this, but headline inflation itself, not core inflation, but headline inflation has not been under 3% for years. Okay, it's been years since it's been under 3%. So let me see if I can find it. So so this is headline inflation. I don't know why it shows up like this. This is kind of weird, but whatever the case. Okay, yeah, I don't want the weekly here. Let me see if I can find the monthly. Okay, so basically, if I go all the way back here to May of 2021, you guys can see this was roughly about the last time that headline inflation was at under 3%. Okay. So the last time we were here was literally like 3.5 years ago. So in my opinion, I could be wrong about this, okay, but in my opinion, I think if we come at 2.9% on Wednesday, or especially even lower than that, that's going to be extremely bullish for the markets. And markets are probably going to, I would say, likely probably have a 4 or 5% move up that day. It would not shock me in the least if the markets just literally went up all day. That's all they did for Wednesday. So anyways, let's get into LTCN now and the rest of the trusts. Excuse me. So we have a few gainers on the day. LTCN's up slightly. The biggest gainers here is going to be GBAT, G-Link, and Zcash. So the thing I want to point out here about LTCN is the last couple of times that we did pop on the price, the RSI was actually above the 50, and it continued to stay above the 50 the entire time, but now we're currently sitting below it. The thing I will say about this, basically about these trusts, I mean, look, guys, I'm going to be honest with you, okay? I think LTCN and BCHG are not going to go to all-time highs until roughly about November, December of this year. Again, it's not that far away. Okay, it's 3 months away. I mean, there's time to accumulate if that's what you want to do. If you don't want to do that, you don't have to. Again, it's your money. You can do what you want. But, the doors or the windows, doors, whatever you want to call it, they're closing. Okay. So usually when we get to roughly about November, that's it. I mean, that's that's your last chance to get in early before prices start popping off. So Bitcoin should be going to new all-time highs by then. And then these specific oscillators, LTCN and BCHG, are going to go up with it, in my opinion. And then everything else outside of that is going to go up with Ethereum and the altcoins and the altcoin season, which will be when the Bitcoin dominance falls off a cliff. And when that happens, I will be sure to let you know. So LTCN, we're looking at this trend line as support. So again, this could range anywhere from 10.5 to about 12.5, right about the time that Bitcoin should be moonshotting to new highs. And then, I wouldn't really call this resistance, since this is kind of a converging line that goes into resistance, but because it is now resistance, we got this gap here. I'm just going to say the start of the target is going to be here at 15. So it's basically 13 to 15 is that zone there, and then 25 to roughly about 27, 54, and then I'll reiterate one more time, 75, 100 to 135, 3 to 400, and 510 respectively before getting to price discovery. So if I were just to measure it from this line here, you're looking at roughly about 36%, 143%. Whoops. And last but not least, roughly about 365% there. And again, these are relatively small moves. I do expect LTCN to at least go up to the previous all-time high or get pretty close to it. So once again, I will show you guys that we were massively oversold here on the daily on the RSI. Okay, that's usually a pretty good bottom indicator. It's not perfect all the time. Sometimes it's a little bit off. But as you guys saw with the flash crash, a lot of the stocks that we posted on X did end up getting this same oversold signal on the daily, and a lot of them have recovered quite nicely since then. So the other thing I want to point out is the very last time, okay, the very last time that we got an oversold signal that was this oversold, you look all the way back here, was at the bear market lows. Okay, that was in October of 2022. We've had a few touches since then. Pretty much every single time this RSI being oversold like this has indicated the bottom, at least in the immediate short term. So you guys can do what you want to with that. The histogram here is turning from a dark red to a light red. That indicates a reversal potentially of momentum. But again, how you guys want to go about that, that's entirely up to you. I'm just presenting the opportunity here. So BCHG, very similar thing, kind of hit the oversold, although not as obvious as LTCN. So we had another one back here, and it did pop immediately after that. And if I go back a little bit further here, you can't really see it, but this is kind of the bear market, more or less the bear market lows here. So we had this oversold signal here, and it took a little while. There was like a 6-month accumulation period, but we did eventually go up. That was basically more or less the bottom on BCHG back then. So again, another gap. That gap ranges roughly about 740 to 810. I do expect that to get filled. And what that means, basically, when I say that, is I am expecting the price to go back up, because in order to fill this gap, it has to go back up, which means it has to get above this resistance zone right here. So very similar to LTCN, we're looking at the support and the trend line kind of as the buying area, the base zone. So roughly about 550 could be all the way out until roughly about maybe 650, 680 a share, somewhere in there as potential buying areas. Resistance is 680 to 760, but because this line is so close to resistance, I'd only be looking at the top here at 760, 1030 to 1250. And then you have, 18 to 20, and then 24 all the way up at the swing high up there. So just giving you guys the moves here, we're looking at roughly about 39%, 123%, 254%, and 330% respectively. For those of you guys that own YMAG and YMAX, I believe that you You'll have to go double check this for yourself, but I think there's only 2 more days before the X date to be able to accumulate shares. So I think Thursday, if I'm not mistaken, is the last day that you'll be able to, or basically Thursday is the X date. So you'll have the next 2 days to pick this up. YMAG, YMAX, and ULTY. We don't own ULTY, but YMAG and YMAX we do. So I just wanted to throw that out there in case some of you may have forgotten about that. So falling wedge on HZEN, bullish pattern. Targets the top of the wedge, so that's $10.5. Basically, the support zone down here I do expect to hold, so 250 to 290. Above that, we have 370 to or 375 to about 420, 690 to $8, and then of course the target, which is 1050. So if I were to even just to measure it from the current price, so 26%, 145% and 217% respectively. That's still pretty good. I do want to point out about this wedge that this thing could actually continue to bleed down. Okay, it's possible. I'm not trying to sound bearish here. Okay, don't misunderstand me. This thing could break out of the wedge at any point in time. Okay, it really, honest to God, could. But usually these wedge patterns, they go roughly about 75% of the way to the apex of the move. So it's going to seem a little ridiculous that I do this, but I just want to kind of give you guys an idea of what that might look like. So we'll just assume for a second that this right here is going to be roughly about your apex. So somewhere December, January. Actually, you know what? Let me even take this out just a little bit further so you guys can really see just how precise this gets. So assuming we have some kind of alt season in Q1 of next year, you can see how tight this wedge gets down here. Now, obviously, it's not going to go all the way down because it would go negative, but you guys see my point. Like at some point, this thing will have to break out. I would wager it's probably it's hard to say exactly when it could break out. I don't think it goes down to under $1, but I just want to point out that it's possible maybe it lasts until like October, November, and then we get a breakout. Okay, that could happen, so just keep that in mind. So anyways, moving on to ETCG. So ETCG is still kind of stuck under this channel, as you guys can see. We did have this huge fat green candle. I'm not sure what the heck happened there, but a lot of buyers just came in out of nowhere. So we're kind of wedged in between support and this sort of channel here. So $8.70 to $10 on the support. I'm not even going to look at these white lines because we're just kind of stuck in between them. They're really close to the current support, so I'm not going to actually use that as a target. 13 to 1590, and then 1770 all the way up to 20. So assuming you just waited to get in, like let's just say at the top of the range, I mean, again, you could get in anywhere in that range. So 33%, 60%, 79%, and roughly about 104% respectively. So ETH, this one also has a gap, just like LTCN and BCHG. Isn't that interesting? So there's a gap here. Yeah. So 23.30 to about 25.25. So I am expecting that to get filled. Possibly some big fat green candle on the CPI or PPI data over the next couple of days would definitely fill it, I would say. So I'm basically just going to look at this area of support down here. So 1050 to 1550, 2350 to about 2850 on the swing high up there. And then you have the cup and handle target pattern up there at 46. Zoom out so you can see it. Cup, handle, boom. Now keep in mind ETH is an ETF now. It's no longer a trust. So you'd have to buy the actual ETF to partake in this. So I'll just... let's see here. Where's a good area? Maybe the tops of those candles right there at 1250. So 89%, 128%, and 270% respectively. I don't think that we necessarily are going to go down to the support, especially with the spot Ether ETFs trading right now. I will say, though, if the yield curve uninverts, or I shouldn't say if, when because the Fed cuts rates and for some reason the markets freak out and we see some kind of dump, which again, I'm not saying that's going to happen. I hope to God it doesn't happen. I'm sure we're all hoping that. It could go down to those support levels, but I mean, honestly though, I really doubt it. I don't see that happening. I mean, guys, we've had two bear markets, two bear markets over the last 2 years and two flash crashes. We had one in 2020, which just so happened to also be a bear market. And we also had one like literally 3 weeks ago. So I think we've had our correction for the year. And if I'm being completely honest, I think market's probably going to go higher into the end of the year. That's what I think. So, and of course, we're in an election year too. There's also that. So, it doesn't look very good for any presidential candidate, Republican or Democrat, if the markets are crashing and falling off a cliff during their election. It just doesn't look good for any candidate. So, you already know they don't want that. So, Phil G, or File G, some of you prefer File G. Sorry, Phil G, File G, either way. So we have a shooting star candle here. It's green though, so I would say it's not necessarily bearish, although we did get a rejection off this resistance. So potentially looking at 470 to 1275. Again, I don't know that it necessarily goes that low, but even at the current price, in my opinion, it's a steal. So 37 to 40 at resistance up here. And then you have roughly about $400 all the way up at the all-time high. So you're looking at roughly about 500%, and then this insane banger trade right here, 5,400% gain. I don't know anybody that would be upset about making, what is that, a 55x on your money? Okay, so GBAT, this thing does look like it wants to have some kind of recovery here. You can see the RSI EMAs are slowly starting to curl up. We're getting a change in color on the histogram. That's all good. We do have this buyer's wick right off support. That's also good. You can see that did land pretty much perfectly with this wick down here. So support as of right now, $4.50 to $5.20. Resistance, $8 to roughly about $10. And then the all-time high up here at 32. So just measuring from the support, 123% and 670% respectively. For those of you guys that want to know where the lower buying levels are, I'll just tell you right now. So you have roughly about $2.30, and then below that, 72 to $1.10. I don't think we get back there anytime soon, though. I'm just going to be honest about it. So GLIV, flip zone here, resistance turn support. So you have 12 to roughly about 1450 there. All-time high is at 80. I do expect these things to go much higher than the all-time highs, a lot of them, if not all of them. During the alt season. If you guys have not been through an alt season in crypto, you are in for a surprise. Let me tell you right now, because it is a wild ride. Again, not financial advice, but I would caution against allowing your emotions to control you. I can't tell you guys what to do, but I will just say that I have learned to control my emotions when seeing these crazy rips to the upside, because it can be pretty overwhelming. I mean, people think these bull runs are going to go on forever and they'll just keep going and they'll never stop. And unfortunately, that's usually when the markets dump, is when people are the most euphoric and they think that nothing can bring the price down. Oh, it's going to $1 billion a coin. That's usually when the whales come in and say, okay, yeah, it's time to sell. So 432% there on GLIV. Let's see, G-Link. So very similar setup here to GBAT. We basically got a bounce pretty much off these wick lows right here, right about there at $35. So it does look like it wants to hold. So we have 39 to 45 as support, 65 to 85 at resistance, and then 220 all the way up there at the all-time highs. So assuming there is some kind of pullback you can get into here, roughly about 86% gain and 388% respectively. GSOL. So this thing is kind of just chopping sideways. I think it's pretty much waiting for alt season, waiting for the potential of a spot Solana ETF. Usually markets will chop sideways. They won't really have a big move if they're waiting for some kind of major event. Like, I'll show you guys an example. And I know this has nothing to do with, it has absolutely nothing to do with what's going on right now with the grayscale trust that we're talking about, but I just want to give you an example here. So give me 1 sec and I'll scroll out here. So you guys can see, and I was trading this morning, but you guys can see that the NASDAQ basically, it had a few volatile, almost violent moves right out of the open, but it kind of more or less basically didn't do anything all day. It pretty much just went sideways. Okay. Why is that? Because PPI and CPI are coming out over the next couple of days. The market is waiting for the big news event. So I suspect Solana and GSOL are probably doing the same thing. So if Solana is to get some kind of spot ETF, which I'm hesitant to say it's going to happen, it's possible, but I don't know that it's necessarily going to happen this cycle. If it does get it, it would basically be just a chop straight into a rip to the upside, after, of course, Ethereum rips, because we haven't really seen that yet, even though the spot Ether ETFs are trading. So, basically this green line here, we're looking for this to flip from resistance to hold as support now. So we're pretty much sitting on it. That's going to be $400. All-time high, 580. I'd be looking for a buy down here at 166 to 200. That's just me. There is a little bit lower support here, so it's hard to tell, but it is here. It's actually quite small compared to the current support I'm talking about here, but 72 to 79. So I don't know that it gets that low. I mean, there would have to be some craziness that happens for that. So I'll give you guys the measured moves here. You're looking at roughly about 45%. And then from this support zone, it would then become 236%. And even below that, roughly about 623%. So GXLM, it's kind of just sitting on that white line. Very flat looking candle here. Of course, we just started the trading week, so we'll see what CPI and PPI does. But this is the buy zone, so 25. Below that, if you're wondering what that is, that's roughly about 530 to, we'll just say $12, roughly about there. Resistance 53 to roughly about around 59, and then 70 all the way up the swing high. So you're looking at roughly about 135% and 179% gain respectively. Keep in mind, the markets may not move for a while, so they might start going up after the Fed cuts rates next month. That's possible, but I would still wager likely we're not going to see the biggest moves on these until the end of the year. So you guys have, in my opinion, I can't promise this, but in my opinion, roughly it should be about a few more months of accumulation that you guys will have. So Mana, we are below this white line here, but again, the weekly has not closed yet, so I still consider this white line to be support. So roughly around $11. Support below that is $1.30 to $3.50. Man, I wish I had known about Ethan's channel back during early spring, summer of last year. I absolutely would have been buying a lot of these trusts at $1, $2 a share, but I didn't know. We didn't know anything about it. So $17 to $20 at that resistance, and then 70 all the way up there at the highs. So we're looking at roughly about 79% and 540% respectively. Now, if it does pop down here before going to all-time highs, which is possible but not likely in my opinion, 511% to roughly about 2,090%. Zcash, again, I don't know what's going on with this one. This is kind of premature because we're not even in alt season yet, but you guys can also see Zcash up here has moved up quite a bit. It's up like, I think, $10 a token or something like that. So, we haven't gotten a weekly confirmation above this support line, but it looks pretty good so far. So I'm going to flip it into support here. So we'll say 430 to roughly about 510 at support, $8 to 960 at resistance, and then 10 and a quarter above and beyond that. So you'd be looking at roughly about 75 to 86% respectively. If there is some kind of pullback here, then it becomes 116 to roughly about 129%. So the support levels below that, you're looking at roughly about 315. and then below that somewhere between 150 to 280. So anyways, hope y'all enjoyed this content. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see y'all later. Peace.